Hi, I'm Peter Jones, Chartered Surveyor, author and property investor. One thing which alarms me slightly is the number of people who appear to come into property with very naive expectations that everything is always going to go well. Now, there's something to be said for that, because I'd much rather that somebody's positive than negative. I'd much rather that somebody's got an optimistic outlook rather than a pessimistic outlook. And I think having an optimistic outlook, generally speaking, is going to help you to achieve more in life, property included. But we need to be real as well. And I see people on the forums or on the Facebook groups talking about their experiences of property. And it happens that perhaps maybe they have a bad thing, a bad circumstance. Something happens in their property journey, or something happens with their first property, such as maybe the tenant doesn't pay the rent. Or maybe the tenant doesn't pay the rent and then does a moonlight flit and disappears. These things happen. But they will then go onto the Facebook groups, they'll go onto the forums, and they'll be talking about this as if this is the most unexpected thing ever, as if somehow life has dealt them a bad hand, as if every other landlord or investor is having a fantastic time and this sort of thing never happens. And I read the posts and it concerns me for them. I don't mean this in a judgmental way. I'm not trying to say that they're wrong to be upset about it. But the reality is that when you go into any business, there is always the potential for something to go wrong. Why would you go into property assuming that everything is going to go right? And it maybe isn't an assumption. Maybe they just don't think about what the downsides could be. Now, I know that many of you have emailed me saying that you like my sort of down-to-earth, tell it as it is kind of approach to property. So let me just tell you how it is. Sometimes things are going to go great, and sometimes things aren't going to go great. But if you go into property not expecting the bad things to ever happen, you are in for a rude awakening, because it will happen. I've had tenants not pay the rent. I've had tenants do a moonlight flit. I've had tenants not look after the property as well as they could have. I've had contractors saying they're going to turn up when they haven't. I've had solicitors saying that they're going to do a deal for me quickly, and then they've done it slowly and I've lost the deal. All of these things can happen. I've had valuations, down valuations. I did a video on that recently. I've had down valuations. I can beat that. I've actually had worse than a down valuation. I had a situation where the valuer wouldn't even get out of the car to look at my property because he disliked my properties so much from the outside that he wouldn't even get out of the car. By the way, it all worked out fine in the end because I got another valuer to come out and he did get out of the car, and that was all fine. But these things happen. There are going to be frustrations. I've had the situation where I've had a mortgage lined up and then the bank have decided at the very last minute they're not going to lend a mortgage. This sort of thing does happen. But if this is the point I'm trying to make, if you come into property expecting that everything is going to go well all the time, then you're in for a big fall. Much better to come into property hoping that things are going to go well, but prepared for the times when they don't go so well, because then you can work around it. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because the posts I've seen on Facebook of people who've suddenly had this realization, you would think that the rug has been pulled from under their feet completely, and I don't think it should be that way. A lot of these things are actually just doing business. Whatever business you go into, as I said earlier, something's going to happen. If you run a market stall, say you sell fruit and veg at a market stall, is somebody going to come along and pinch the odd apple? I would imagine they would. What if you run a retail shop? Will you get shoplifters? Yes, of course you will. Does that mean that anybody who's thinking about going into retail is going to say, oh, I'm not going to go into retail just in case I get shoplifters? No, of course they're not. In fact, I read once that I think Walmart are being shoplifted every second of every day or something crazy like that, because it just happens. But it's just a cost of doing business. I'm not condoning it, by the way. I'm not saying that shoplifting is a good thing, or that or that you shouldn't, or we should be blasé about it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that things happen. And if you want to come into property, you need to accept that some things aren't going to go smoothly. But when they don't go smoothly, it's not a big drama. It's not the end of the world. It's just something that happens. And so we will work around it because we're professional property investors. We will have systems and processes to cope, one of which might be we just take a bit of time to ourselves and we take 4 deep breaths while we let the news of whatever it is that's just happened sink in. but we don't get emotionally involved. We don't say, oh, my life is ruined. It's not an emotional thing. It is just a business thing. And if we can keep it as a business thing, then everything is going to be good. Well, I hope you found that informative and inspirational. And if you want help in property, please do come over to my website, www.thepropertyteacher.co.uk. Loads of great resources there, including my blog. There's loads of free videos, loads of great articles. There's free reports to download, including Learning with Peter, where you'll be able to access resources like my video courses, like my ebooks, including my home study course, the Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop, which I've literally sold thousands of copies of, which takes you through how I started in property, literally with none of my own money, but how I was able to build a portfolio of £2 million worth of property in just 4 years. I'll show you everything that I did right so that you can do the same, and I'll show you everything that I did wrong. I'll tell you about all of my mistakes so that you can avoid them, so that you can progress in property far more quickly than me. Until next time, here's to successful property investing.